right, let's get started. Welcome everyone to our panel tonight, How Video Game Films Get Good, presented by Underrated Movie Podcast. Please?
Derick McDuff.
We're going to be exploring a conversation with our panelists here today about video game film adaptations and the journey they've had, they're currently having, and the direction they're going to go and they will have. I've already prefaced a little bit about the Q&A. We'll be doing that if you have any questions for us outside. But to handle a conversation of this magnitude, we've assembled a crack team of panelists that we're going to be well-versed in film, games, and everything in between. And I'd like to introduce them to you. So, for introductions first, I'll start with myself as your moderator today. My name is Kurosh Jozavi. I'm a host of the Savepoint Stories podcast, where I interview game developers and folks in the gaming industry, celebrating what they do and what they bring and asking tons of questions and having fun. Woo! Our first panelist is an award-winning middle school teacher and a halfway decent podcaster. His words, not mine, I should say. He is 48% of the Old Switcharoo Gaming Retro podcast with Mike and Jaymo. Please welcome Jeremy Jaymo Strauss.
Nice. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Our next panelist is an amazingly talented screenwriter and a host of the podcast Beyond the Screenplay. Please welcome Tricia Aurand. Our next panelist is not just the host of today's panel. He is also a film critic, writer of Watch Mojo, and the host of Underrated Movie Podcast, which this panel is presented by. Please welcome Derick McDuff. And next up we have someone who's worked in film and TV sound editor, and Emmy-nominated for her work as a dialogue editor on Star Trek Section 31. Please welcome to the stage Austin and Olivia Kendrick. And last, but certainly not least, our next panelist is a pop culture reviewer and a podcaster on Nerd Initiative and Geek Freaks. He's also the host of the wonderful podcast, the Sick Burn Podcast. Please welcome to the stage, Thomas Craig.
Woo! I didn't know we could make our intros fun like Jaymo's.
Write your own rules.
Okay, so before we can get into how they get good or what good means, we should understand kind of a level playing field of the perspective everyone's bringing to the stage. So I'd like to we'll start with Thomas, we'll start with you and we'll work our way over. Yeah. But how do each of you define and view what makes a video game adaptation good or successful?
Oh man, it's changed so much. So for me, I was born in the 80s and I was a child of the 90s, right? And so the first video game movie I ever saw was a Super Mario Bros. Movie. And, I thought it was a pretty good movie. After learning more about movies, it seems almost universally hated, except for someone last night was like, that's one of my favorite movies. And I was like, what? So I think it's when you first meet that movie, it's like the stage of life that you're in. It's also your connection to that property. Because there's a lot of movies where, at the right time, we're going to probably talk about at some point, but like the Lara Croft movie, I grew up playing that game. So when it came out, I was like, this movie's awesome. Again, for people who just watch movies, they didn't like it. So I think it also is when you are brought into that property. And I think I have another answer as we get closer to like what video game adaptations are now.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Little tease for future.
That's right.
Leave them wanting more.
Austin, what about you?
For me, it's something where the spirit of the original game has to be present. But more than that, I think that good adaptation comes down to good storytelling. No amount of kind of self-referential, imagery or catchphrases or anything like that is going to save weak storytelling, flat characters, poor pacing. But that being said, video games have such a wide berth of storytelling that there is no one formula that 100% works for every single video game. So it's a very interesting area when it comes to adaptation specifically. But ultimately, if the storytelling is good, people will come.
Okay. Derick?
Yeah, so I think it's like any other adaptation, whether it be a book or a play or, what have you, as long as you're, like Austin was kind of saying, capturing the spirit of the thing into the adaptation and respecting the source material, and while not being completely beholden to it, because you can't do a beat-for-beat adaptation of a game, because no one would watch that. You can just go on Twitch and watch people play video games if you want to see that. Nobody wants to see Mario just hit blocks over and over again. So adapting it from the medium of games to the medium of film, while also being respectful of the themes that are present in the games, the characters, things that people love about those games, and keeping the core kind of that game while transitioning it to film.
Tricia?
Yeah. Very similar to you guys. I care about something being good in and of itself. And therefore, I feel like the audience should not have to be familiar with the IP to enjoy it. I come at that from a personal standpoint. I do not actually play video games. And Derick asked me here on purpose to bring that perspective. But I'm perfectly able to enjoy a movie based on a video game that I haven't played if it's good, and that comes down to the storytelling, as you were saying. I think basically it does come down to essentially two core philosophies, right? Either you adapt the story of the game if it has a story. If it doesn't have a story, then you have a little bit more leeway as a screenwriter, but you still need to adapt something, right? The experience of playing the game, or the tone, or the world, or the feeling of the game. And so I think preserving those things, you called it the spirit of the game, but it's really that. Preserving those things, if you can, are important to keep that audience that's coming over from the game, but you also have to get the audience that hasn't played it. And I think the sweet spot there is what makes movies successful, not just I personally like them, but also financially successful most of the time.
Oh, thank you. That's a great point. And Jaymo?
I just think that as a medium, video games are so special. I assume you guys feel that way too, because you're here. But, so much of life in the world, you can feel so powerless, and, what we do seems to have no consequence. But in a video game, what you do has consequence. And it has this way of whisking us away that I don't think a lot of genres can do. Show of hands, did anyone do most of their traveling during the pandemic in Animal Crossing New Horizons? Anyone do that? Was anyone's island really good? Show of hands, keep your hand, right? Okay. Okay, right? I want to see it later. But I just remember that moment being so special because it made us a little less afraid. And I think that when a good game can do that, it embeds it in our hearts a bit more. So for a movie based on a video game to be good, I think you need to capture that feeling of escapism. And you have to be so connected to the hero that you feel empowered just by watching them. And that's no small feat, so I'm not surprised some have even been bad before.
True, and we'll get into that in a second. But before we do, I think the audience and myself have a little bit of a question here. You brought a prop. You brought something. Could you explain it briefly and give us some context?
Does anyone remember the Virtual Boy when it came out? A few people? Okay. Does anyone remember the only commercial they made for it? It was this boy with long hair running through a post-apocalyptic wasteland, and the Virtual Boy was chasing him down. So that's me.
Okay.
Yeah. And that post-apocalyptic wasteland looked kind of quaint, by today's standards. So I was like,
times have changed.
Not too bad. Yeah. It's I'll take it. Right here?
That's what he brought.
We can try it later.
Okay. For after the panel.
After
You're
the
right.
panel.
Okay. But you hit on something that I want to kind of get into as our now that we've set a foundation, is that's the friction, the struggles. And so Tricia and Austin, I'd like to talk to you first here briefly. From your perspectives working in the film industry, what do you see contributing to that gap or that inability to potentially translate? Is there things that make it uniquely difficult for video game adaptations in any way from your perspective?
I think one of the most interesting things when it comes to video games is that in terms of the way that the audience interacts with the story, the way that they would interact with a film or with a book or with any other medium, is that they have this participation element that turns that story from that passive experience into an active interaction. And when it comes to adaptation, you have to think about when that layer of interaction is, kind of taken away when being adapted to a film. how do you still kind of leave that hook? A lot of times video games, when you jump into them, if it's not the story that's pulling you in, it's the feeling of moving through this world yourself. You're making these choices. You are impacting that world. How do you honor that? How do you bring the audience in on that same level when that active interaction has been removed? You know, and I think it is again, there's not a 100%, set formula for putting that back into place, but I think that's one area where things can really get lost in translation. How do you put the player back into the story?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Again, not having had that element feel missing to me as someone who just watches video game movies sometimes. I think obviously there's a long-ish history now, 30 years-ish of video game film, starting with Super Mario Brothers in 1993. And then coming up into the present day. And really, video game movies have kind of existed in this tricky place of what the medium is doing, how technology is impacting the medium of video games as they are being developed, how that overlays with the technology of the film industry as that is being developed. And then all along, again, sort of in concert with that, the philosophy of studios when it comes to how they approach filmmaking and what they see as viable at the box office. So when you look at some of the earliest adaptations of video games into movies like Super Mario Brothers and some of the other ones from the 90s, Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, that kind of thing, you have video games that are really just, very, very basic. There's no story to them at all, really. There's sort of this arcade-based model of game. There's no story. There are some characters, kind of. There's not very much like dramatic source material to adapt at all. The studios didn't have a roadmap, but they also didn't think they needed one. And so they didn't try. They were just kind of trying to cash in on that. And so you get these really cheesy movies that are kind of weird and also just like laughably bad now these days, right? And then when you get into the aughts, you had a few financially successful adaptations like Tomb Raider and like, what was the one, I wrote this down? Resident Evil. Yeah, really, really great, but they're kind of financially successful. The critics still don't like them. They're still struggling with the story piece and how to bring in audiences that aren't already built in. And again, the film industry is changing rapidly all along. So we're seeing now this sort of like two-pronged approach by studios if they are interested in funding video game films, one of which is to treat some of the IP as like a playground, where you have something like Super Mario now, something like World of Warcraft, or what's the other one I'm thinking of? Minecraft. They're just kind of treating it as like a playground, and here's a world, and here's all the stuff that you can do. And then you have the like serious, weighty, more dramatic adaptations that are often longer, and those are being adapted for TV. So you kind of see the split now where features are being made based on these like sort of more fun games that have less of a story, a narrative to them inherently. And then you have things that are being adapted for TV that are kind of like treated as prestige video games, for lack of a better way to say it.
Yeah. You had mentioned, the struggles of the genre, right? And like, I heard a couple of my students complaining about how bad the Five Nights at Freddy's sequel was. But I don't think they understand how bad video game movies used to be.
They don't know how good they have it nowadays.
Like, people would have loved Borderlands if it had come out in 1996. Like,
Right.
it's not a good movie, but like compared to like what we were getting, like if we had Kate Blanchett and like it looked that good, we would be like, oh, this is incredible. This is the best video game movie ever. But like in a modern landscape, doesn't really hold up.
You and I have discussed Uwe Boll.
Yes.
The director who, like, German tax law, it was like a loophole, allegedly. And, he got licenses for like House of the Dead and Far Cry and like these big names, but no one working in movies had grown up with them because games are still so new. Like, we've had hundreds of years of movies, and so just now we're...
Just the 100.
Yes, the 100.
And change.
Casual.
But, you know, it's still, now we're getting people like Seth Rogen who like grew up, you know, with some of these nerdier properties, and there's a bit more heart to it, I think, than there used to be.
Yeah, and that is something that I did want to talk about. Is I think that one of the reasons that we are seeing this kind of resurgence, or not resurgence, just like surge of video game movies being good, is that people who care about them are now adapting them, because people who grew up with video games are now making them, whereas in the past it was just like you said, Uwe Boll, or like, you know, W.S. Anderson, people who don't really care about the source material. Like, this is just like a property that I can slap a thing on and people will go see it because it's called Resident Evil, because it's called House of Dead, because it's called whatever. Whereas now it's like, oh no, this game means a lot to me. You're seeing someone, like, to use a very recent example, like Markiplier, who, you know, became like, you know, he was streaming Iron Lung. People got really into it. He cared a lot about this indie game to the point where he's like, I'm gonna make an indie movie, and the fans came out for it, and he put so much passion into that. So we are seeing people who actually care about movies making these movies, and I think that makes a lot of difference.
Yeah.
I think you bring up some good points, and Tricia, you hit on something that I wanted to touch on, which was the technology and that evolution. But it made me think of the larger subject of like right place, wrong time, or wrong place, right time. Do you think that, not just with even Hollywood, and I'll start with you, Tricia, on this, of viewers, do you think viewers were ready for some of these films at the time that they were coming out and that you looked at? Because you look at some of them now and they have such cult followings for like the original Mortal Kombat or things like that.
Yeah. And the short answer is no, partially because at their inception, video games were thought of as being entertainment for children. Yeah. And so, like, even when you had something like these early adaptations in the 90s that were aimed not exactly at kids, who was Super Mario Brothers for? Is my main question.
That's part of the problem. I mean, that's why I got rewritten 6 times.
I
Because it was
know,
like,
I
this should
know.
be for kids. Wait, let's make it serious and grounded. And they're like, then you get that Frankenstein movie that some people love.
It
Not saying
was
it's bad.
pitched as Blade Runner for kids, apparently.
And-
Like, that's not a joke.
And it does feel like a tonal mishmash of things. But again, culturally, video games had no artistic weight to them. They weren't seen as being like serious material for adults to consume. And they were marketed that way for children also. Like, you know, you get the kids in the 80s and they go down to the arcade and they play games. And so entertainment based on video games had no prestige whatsoever. And this is the same reason that critics were still panning video game movies in the 90s, even in the early aughts. Even though they were making money, the critics still felt dismissive of them because they were based on video games.
Yeah, just a little tidbit with that. There was not a video game movie that had a positive Rotten Tomato score until 2019 with Detective Pikachu. That was the very first one to get, like, where a majority of critics actually said this is a good movie.
But Thomas, do you like the Bob Hoskins Mario, right? Does anyone does anyone else like that movie, kind of? Yes, okay.
Yeah.
Got some fans out
Thank
here.
you.
not good.
Thank you.
No, it's not. But
But it's
I
a
think
good time.
It's a good time.
Because a lot,
Yeah, I
a lot
think-
of those 90s ones are like good time, not a great movie.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah,
'Cause they
but I
always-
think that's the thing about like that genre when they were coming out with these movies. To your point, Tricia, yeah, you're right. I mean, like there was no story, but like it was the spectacle of the game. And then for Mortal Kombat, they like threw in an extra fight scene because they're like, there's just not enough fighting. But then the people who were making it also had to go back because they're like, we want a PG-13. In like what made that game famous was the blood.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was like this, yeah, it was just a weird time. I love that game. Like, it was great. I love that movie.
And there's something I think about the weirdness or the more experimental and ambitious that I wanted to hit on too. We often, not even just with video game adaptations, but you see just, there tends to be formulaic or by the numbers types of films, but in the video game adaptation space, there have been some big swings. We have seen them succeed, we have seen them miss. Derick, I kind of want to start with you on this. Are there any notable big swings that you really want to be like, I champion this, or I really, like, I think it resonates, or they should take note to?
Yeah, I mean, I think that in the probably like mid-aughts to like the 2010s is where you start to see we're going to try and take this seriously. And there was a lot of big swings where they didn't necessarily always work out, but I think of the first Silent Hill movie where it's like we have some real people on this. You have, you know, Roger Avery, who had won an Oscar for screenwriting, like writing that movie. And then you have like studios being like, we're gonna actually like put some real talent both behind and in front of the camera, put hundreds of millions of dollars into making this. This is not just kind of like schlock we're putting out for kids. We're respecting the source material, doesn't always work, but like the fact that you're like getting Disney being like, our next Pirates of the Caribbean is going to be a Prince of Persia trilogy, doesn't work out, but the fact that they did that is cool. And same thing with Duncan Jones making his Warcraft movie. Doesn't really work out, but this high fantasy, like epic production. Or I even think of, I'm spacing on it, but there's, right after Macbeth, Justin Kurzel and then, what's his name? The guy who was in Macbeth, the main star, Michael Fassbender, sorry. Michael Fassbender, sorry, there's a lot of Macbeths.
Which Macbeth?
Justin Kurzel and Michael Fassbender and the cinematographer of that movie make one of the most beautiful Shakespearean adaptations of all time. The three of them work together again on Assassin's Creed, and like the next year, and it's just like you went from Shakespeare to Assassin's Creed. The fact that they did that, once again, a movie that doesn't quite work, but that they treated Assassin's Creed with the same respect as The Bard is pretty wild to me.
Thomas, what about you? What do you think? Is there any notable swings for you?
Yeah, I mean, I like thinking of Assassin's Creed because I remember I played that game and then I was like, oh my God, there's a movie for this, yes. And I loved Michael Fassbender, and it didn't capture the story. And I think the difference is when it comes to the popcorn or like the really fun movies, right? Or like the fun video games like the Mario Bros. Because there's no story, they didn't really try that often. And now as we've gotten to a place where there are more story, there's more cinematic appeal to these games, it's become harder and harder. And I think Assassin's Creed, much like Tomb Raider, was those movies for me when I was growing up where I was like, they're deviating too far from the game. Yeah. And that's when I was like, oh man, it's really hard for me to get on board with this. Even though like I see him doing the swan dive and he's got the switchblade and he's got the cloak like my boy out there. It just was getting away from that game. And then I think that's why, I guess I'll jump ahead, but like now they really are respecting the story just as much as like the fun aspects of the game. And I think that's why we're seeing better adaptations now.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you're saying that respecting the source material, does that weigh more for you when there's a more narrative game as opposed to like a sandbox type game?
Yeah, like I think there was always a respect for the elements of the game that people liked, right? Like Mortal Kombat had all the fighting, and like Mario Bros had like, let's throw in Goombas and mushrooms. But like, now there's, again, respect for the story. One that I'm thinking about is like, I know it's not a movie, but the Fallout series. Okay. Like Jonathan Nolan, like he loves Fallout. He loves the story of Fallout, and you see elements of the game in there as well with like the RPG and like obviously the characters and the villains and all that. But it really is just a true love of like this world that was built in the game that he's now just bringing to the screen.
It's interesting though, because like if you sometimes stick so close to the source material, it can be a little inaccessible, like especially if you don't play the games. Derick and I saw, going back to Silent Hill, Return to Silent Hill, which you had talked about earlier, and if you've played the game, a lot of moments hit differently. Yeah. Like, and I'm like, oh my God, it's the Abstract Daddy, and Eric's like, what are you talking about? And like that movie I think was a big swing because it tried to stay so faithful, maybe to its own detriment.
Yeah. It can feel like a checkbox sometimes of like, did we hit this moment? Did we hit that moment?
It was guilty of that at points.
But then you're not getting what it means, what the context is behind it, or the essence of it.
Yeah.
Can I throw out like, did you guys watch the World of Warcraft movie?
I kind of liked it.
You kind of liked it?
I did.
Did you play Warcraft?
I did. I'm a cheap date though. Okay. Like I just like it looked cool. Like
well, that's one of the ones I brought up was because it was Duncan Jones. It's like this is a real respected filmmaker making his Warcraft movie.
Right.
And it's interesting watching the two mediums kind of be in conversation with one another because in my opinion, I feel like video games weren't really taken seriously as a medium for storytelling until they started really trying to emulate the visual storytelling aspects of movies. You see that kind of, especially in the like early 2010s with things like The Last of Us, so cinematic. And that was when kind of the rest of the world woke up to, oh, we can actually do stories here. It's like, yes, we always have been able to, but it's then interesting watching, kind of, if you, like you were saying, of like if you try to do just a beat for beat, one-to-one adaptation, it can lose the soul of the story, and so it's kind of watching the two mediums kind of, there has to be a constant conversation between the two in order for, any of it to work, for it to connect again.
And part of it has to do with the limitations and the construction of the different media. And so, if you have a movie, a feature film, it's about 2 hours. It should be about 2 hours, and not too much longer than that, ideally. But the structure and the language of that medium are fundamentally different than virtually every other medium, including, for the most part, video games. Yeah. I love that you were highlighting how they've been in conversation with each other. And video games owe a lot to film and vice versa. But I think you need to have someone who understands, if you're going to make it into a feature film, you need to have someone who understands what a feature film is. Mm-hmm. You can't have somebody who understands the soul and the construction and the narrative, tissue of a video game, and then try to just yank that over and be and then put it in this box now. It doesn't go that way. And so I think that a lot of the problems that we see in the storytelling come from that sort of push and pull. You mentioned being faithful to the source material, but if you're taking a video game that takes dozens, if not hundreds of hours to play, then you can't be faithful to that source material. You have to pick one aspect of it, really, to be faithful to. You can pick, the tone and the feeling of it. Something like Silent Hill does that, but doesn't, do much else. Actually, critics really liked Silent Hill.
The first one still,
yeah.
They kept come around, but
They did. It did not make any money, really, but they did kind of like it. But you have something like Warcraft, which is the density and the lore. We're going to do the lore, but they're not going to do, the other fundamental storytelling things. And then you have something like The Last of Us, the TV series, which is in a different box because it's in TV, which I think is a smart way to approach some kinds of games. But anyway, you're kind of just having to pick one aspect of the video game experience and kind of lean in heavy on that and try to encapsulate that in this tiny bite-sized box of a feature film, if you can. And then if you can't do that, then you probably should do something longer, like a limited series or a TV series of several seasons.
Yeah. What was a really good bite-sized bite of faithfulness was, remember in 2005's Doom, starring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and Carl Urban? Okay, remember the first-person
No one
shooter
remembers
sequence?
that.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of
faithful.
Kind of.
Such
No
a
one
faithful
remembers
adaptation.
See, that's the thing where I'm just that's them this is a video game thing, right? First person.
It's amazing.
Without really understanding,
It's so cool.
that's not interactive.
Yeah.
Well, there's something I wanted, Tricia, you were hitting on is approach. I think we need to really examine what is the approach, whether it be the medium of film or TV, or even live action, animated, or episodic. How much do you think that plays into all of this, or have you seen any notable wins or losses or fails in this way?
I mean, in preparation for this panel, I watched a few of the more recent video game movie adaptations that I had missed, and I saw the Super Mario Brothers movie that I had not seen. And I was delighted by it. And I think the animation is a big part of the reason why. I think approaching some of these games that are so fundamentally animated, the joy of playing them is watching, in that case, the graphics, but there's that nostalgia for the graphics and for just what the screen looks like. And that movie did a really good job of translating gameplay logic into fun little sequences. And I just had a great time. It made me think about being a kid and playing those games. And I think it's a really excellent example of how to take something that kind of doesn't have a story, but is a lot of fun to play and make it fun to watch. And animation is so good at doing that kind of thing.
Yeah. And that also comes back to that idea of just capturing the spirit of the thing. You brought up the Fallout series, which, that isn't the story, the actual plot of what is happening in that series is entirely new. These are new characters that we're following, but it is the world that we are familiar with, and the way that they have honored all of those decades of world building. And a fundamental part of that world building is the sense of humor, the really dark, dry sense of humor that is such the heartbeat of Fallout, where it's you take that single element away from that adaptation, you take that one thing out, and it no longer feels like Fallout. That tone and humor, and that is also an aspect of faithfulness that really does, I think, make or break whether an adaptation feels correct.
You hit on something with that, Austin, about like the palette or the tone. And I know other mediums, when they get adapted, they can draw from whether a book or some other, like comics. There's a visual palette, there's other palettes. We were talking about this a little bit briefly earlier. Games uniquely have an audio palette that you can draw from and either lean on or divert from. Can you share any insight on anything you have seen or in that space for game adaptations?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because this is one of the few kind of source materials that has, like you said, people know how these stories sound. And when they're going into an adaptation, they're expecting that element to also be preserved the same way they're expecting, the world and the characters and whatever element is being, that is a fundamental part of adaptation. The thing that's interesting is that the range in what sonic palette has been established can vary so widely. You have something that is so deeply cinematic, like The Last of Us, where that already has such a rich, textured sonic palette that when it came to adapting that, it's like, okay, this is already pretty well built out. Versus you have something like Five Nights at Freddy's that doesn't really make itself available to a super dense, library of sounds. I actually had a colleague that worked on the first Five Nights at Freddy's film, and he was talking about how difficult it was with what kind of threadbare sounds they did have, while also trying to honor what little they did have and figure out how to fill in the gaps in between. And so I think that exists no matter what game is being adapted. It is, how do we honor that existing sonic palette? Where do we fill in those gaps? It just depends. It's just how wide those gaps are just vary from piece to piece.
Okay.
Can I be really literal for a second?
Absolutely.
The Sonic palette, you mentioned that. So, I know. The Sonic the Hedgehog movies are really special. My brothers and I grew up playing them together.
Yeah.
And one of the most profound moments for me was when we saw the Sonic the Hedgehog movie. Because I don't know if you guys remember how troubled that production was, but Sonic with the teeth.
Ban ugly Sonic. Ban ugly
Take a look
Sonic.
at visual
And
edible.
then
My
they
sleep
did
paralysis
something that I
demon.
don't think had been done before in video game movies, which is listen to the fans. They delayed it for 4 months. They retooled it, and they fixed it. And they brought Jim Carrey in there, and you're written the ring sound effects, and it sounds so much like what we remember.
Yeah.
And when I first saw it, my brothers and I, our mom had just passed away, and my dad right there, he took us to see the movie. And at the end of the movie, I don't know if you remember this moment, but it's my favorite moment. The movie's over, Robotnik's been defeated, spoilers. And James Marsden and Tika Sumpter are just painting their house, and there's this beautiful piano cover of John Batiste's Green Hill Zone. Yeah. And I just had this feeling of oh my God, the movie was good. We're all here together, we're gonna be okay. And I think that a good video game can give you that security, and a good video game movie does it too.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
You know where I'm thinking of, and it's definitely not as beautiful as your story, but it totally defined the movie, which was Mortal Kombat. And it's every time I hear that, I'm "Yeah!"
Just as beautiful.
But
No.
yeah, that song pops up every once in a while, and you're like, hell yeah! Remember Raiden? He wasn't even Asian. Yes. You know what I mean? It was great.
For me, it was once again in the Sonic series because I grew up on the Sonic Adventure Battle 2.
Oh, so good.
First game with Shadow the Hedgehog. I'm sure a lot of people like it. And when they fly into space and Live and Learn comes on, but it's the Junkie XL remix. I'm how am I living in reality right now? There's Keanu Reeves as Shadow the Hedgehog with Junkie XL remix of this song that I used to listen to as a 13-year-old all the time.
Yeah.
That's where we're at with video game movies, and it blew my mind.
Yeah.
We are. That's beautiful. And something I want to hit on, we have those staple iconic games, you have Mario, you have your Sonics that you can really, every large amounts of people can draw to. But Derick, you hit on something with Iron Lung I wanted to touch on. So I'll start with you on this one. But we see more, with the Hollywood industry, they're what's bankable? What's something we can really put money behind and do? But I think something that we're starting to see is, what about the things no one expects? What about the things that are low budget and just trying really, like we said, big swings? Do you think there's some merit to that approach, starting to build more momentum of maybe not the biggest IP, but maybe a Parappa or some other game that's like not, or Patapon or something like that, getting a feature of some sort? Like, do you think there's merit to that?
Oh, absolutely, because indie gaming is such a big thing because, it's very accessible. A lot of people can make an indie game, and just like gaming has become more and more or accessible, I should say, to game makers in the last, 20 years with like digital cameras and everything, filmmaking is also much more accessible. And I think that's why you got to see Iron Lung, because that is an indie film based on an indie game. Yeah. So I think we are going to, especially with the phenomenal success of that, I know Markiplier had a YouTube channel, but he is not, that was his first, movie that I guess he had done some stuff on YouTube, but it was his first like theatrical movie of that kind of scale. So I think we are going to see more and more films being made from, channels like that. I don't mean little channels, but like people like that, independent filmmakers. And I think that they are going to be a lot of times based on these indie games that have maybe a cool concept like Iron Lung did, where there might not be this big story, but someone's like, I want to play in this world. This is a sandbox that I really like. I want to create in it.
No, thank you. And Thomas, I want to start with you on something. We're talking about what isn't working, what is, and the variations, but I kind of want to focus in on what is working, like the moments where you can scream Mortal Kombat like that. What are you seeing
Every
now
day.
that's really shifting with that, like that is happening more consistently for you, that you're like, hey, we need to take note of these positives, these wins, from your perspective?
I'm really curious for the people who are like in the industry, what you think about it. But it's like when you look at The Last of Us, when you look at Fallout, it's like people who, like even with the new God of War, like they're bringing people from the video game world who actually created those games into the creation process. And it's like there's a collaboration between somebody who knows how to make a show or knows how to make a movie, and also the person who made the game. And I feel like that's becoming more of a thing, which I think is a good thing. Although I am curious, like if people here were more on board with the shot of God of War, or if you were like, that looks shitty, sorry kids, or something like that. But I think that's a giant win kind of as a gamer.
Okay.
But I don't know if that's like a thing where people who are just coming in from loving movies or loving shows, if they see that as a win though.
Well, it's a terrible angle. Did you see the picture? No one looks good from that angle. Why did they, like, his guts,
thank you.
like, he looks amazing to me. It made me feel so bad. Everyone's like, oh, Kratos let himself go. And I'm like, uh-oh.
I didn't think it was that, I know, I was like, I didn't think it was that bad
Kratos'
either.
body, like.
Yeah, I didn't think it was that bad either, but then you see people come in and they're like, photoshopping it, so he's like extra ripped. And like, I think that is a hard part in adapting a game into something live action, but I also don't see that as a detriment. To me, that picture captures the spirit of what God of War is. So I don't know, that kind of gets away from
Well,
the
I think,
question.
that it's something you see in every medium where there's like an iconic character or an iconic whatever from that medium, and then they release the first thing. Like, we saw it happen with Heath Ledger and the Joker, how mad the fans got when they like first revealed Heath Ledger. They're like, what? The guy from all the rom-coms, and he looks like so disheveled and different. And then, of course, one of the greatest, not just comic book performances of all time, but incredible, just like he won that posthumous Oscar. So like the first take, fans are always going to be a little bit salty. Once we see like the full thing, I think it's a little more fair to judge.
Well, it's interesting how it ages too, because I remember when, as a kid, Street Fighter II, right?
Yeah.
And that movie was critically panned. It's my favorite so bad it's good movie. And like Raul Julia's M. Bison is iconic, and it was his last performance. Like he really put his heart into that. And he has that iconic line about, forgetting the day that Chun-Li's father was killed, and for me it was Tuesday, right? And it's vicious because he's like, he doesn't even remember. But if it was Tuesday, Kurosh, that means he knows the day. He's lying, right?
Which makes him even more villainous. But Jaymo, I wanted to, looking at that on Tuesday, we're today on Saturday, and tomorrow's Sunday.
That's right.
This is a weird segue, but I'm trying to get into the topic of the future, right? And where are games? It was, you went with me, it's fun. But where do you think, and for everyone here, what do you think we're going? Where should we be going? Where are we going in that way? Are we going to see like a Christopher Nolan cinematic universe? Are we going to see Ryan Coogler take an Oscar for a video game adaptation? Are we going to see a Scorsese adaptation of some sort? Like, what is the realm of possibility that you think is going to be the next few years.
Yeah, I definitely think Derek's right. I think indie games with indie filmmakers are probably the future of it because it's so rife, for different adaptations. What I'm worried about is what Illumination and Nintendo just did. Because if you haven't heard, plug your ears if you don't want to know, but is that bad for the panel? Don't plug your ears. But they just announced Fox McCloud in Super Mario Galaxy.
Super Mario, yeah.
And I'm like, where's my Star Fox movie? Like, I don't want them to do like a Justice League thing where they cram all these characters we haven't given their own films and no context. Like, I don't know if you ever played Star Fox.
Sure.
Yeah, okay. Star Wars, but like I want a Star Fox movie before he starts getting into like a Smash Brothers movie.
Okay.
And I want it with Muppets, and I want their legs. Anyway, so
Interesting request, but I'm sure that Hollywood will make it work.
I just don't want them to get impatient and jump to a cinematic universe. Like, introduce these characters slowly so that people who don't play the games have the context they need.
Yeah, and we've already been, we touched on it earlier, we've kind of already been at a point when it comes to video game adaptations of this kind of view of like, you know what, it's a big name, we'll just slap it on this movie, doesn't matter if it's good or not, people will come see it because of the big name. We do not want to return back to that space, especially not when we've come so far in the way of honoring those characters, honoring these stories, honoring these pieces of art that people really love and care about, We don't want to regress in that way, It's really important to we've hit a real beautiful sweet spot, and so it's really about keeping it on the rails there and keeping that balanced.
How do you all feel about the Minecraft movie? Because that was really successful.
It was.
Yeah. So I'm curious on your thoughts on like, how do you feel about that? Because I enjoyed it, but my friends who played Minecraft, and it's probably not everybody in the room, did not like it. But they're older.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing because that is a game that doesn't have like a linear narrative, but I think that one thing that it got so right was that it kind of captured this, not only did it really do a good job of capturing really iconic, imagery and, sounds and that world, but also this kind of sense of community that is inherent to Minecraft as a player, and I thought that capturing that was a huge success of the movie in adaptation.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't love that movie, but I think that it does really honor that game. Like, and I didn't play Minecraft, but I know enough about it to know that that game is all about creativity. It's all about building things. It's all about imagining what could be. And I think that's one thing the movie did really well is capture that spirit of imagination and creativity.
But maybe kids use that for ill instead of for good with the whole, I don't know if I should say lava chicken. I don't want them to trash the theater or anything in here. But like, I don't think kids were like trashing the movie theaters because the movie was really good. You know what I mean? Like, I think they were probably pretty bored, but like, I do think that it is creative in a way that kids who love Minecraft love to share creations, and the little lava chicken kiosk was like, it was fun for them to see something that they might have built in the game.
Yeah, it was not for me, but I saw that movie with about 8,000 children in the theater, and they seemed to love it and had seen it multiple times already because I know the parents were like, "You've seen the post-credit scene, let's go."
You love that for them.
Yeah, it's interesting in terms of where we're going. I think we'll probably, I actually wonder if this split that we've seen with like animated, feature film, more family-friendly sort of action adventure, pushing that into theaters, and then having this more prestige, complicated, dramatic, based on these sort of longer, more narrative games. I think that split could continue to widen. I think that studios, one thing we know about studios is that they are allergic to risk. And they love IP. Now, there are some interesting studios that are willing to bet, and like, independent type distributors and things like that. They love to bet on filmmakers, like sort of unique, interesting filmmakers who want to do something based on an indie game. Like, that could be a really interesting creative route that would go, because you have the like sort of a safety net of some IP, some kind of narrative structure to hold an idea together, and some built-in audience to it. Yeah. And then they could end up giving it to a really interesting director. A lot of those kinds of movies are director-driven. You could get a director attached to it, and you can get bankrolled for a lot of different things. The trick is finding the right filmmaker with the right material. And so, you ask if we're going to see Ryan Coogler win an Oscar for a video game movie, yeah, or a TV show. Maybe. I think that that's a strong possibility, but it has to be something that's a really good fit for the director's sensibilities and for what they're interested in. What we all want, I think, is video games adapted by people who love them.
Yeah.
And so, but it's tricky these days finding a director with enough juice who really cares about a game, who wants to do it in a way that a studio will also financially get on board with. And so that's what I was saying about those animated movies. Those are expensive as hell to make. But if you can make them on these really, really big games, that financial bet starts to make sense for a studio to do. And so, yeah, doing these animated movies, these family sort of action adventures, which like Sonic are live action, but are they? Those kinds of movies, again, you're gonna spend $200 million making a movie. It better be on a huge game. It better have wide appeal. The whole family has to be able to go see that in a movie theater. And if you want to make something more interesting, you're going to need a really creative vision for it. And I think indie games being adapted in that direction, and for TV, as I said, make a lot of sense. So I think we'll kind of see maybe those paths continue to, the lanes, kind of getting worn into, a little bit more.
I feel like there's a lot of ideas on this stage, and I want to end with our last question about each of your ideas. So I'm going to go from Jaymo onward. What is your pitch for a game adaptation you'd like to see that you haven't seen or you'd like to be reattempted?
I was so excited when I saw this question. I felt it in my whole body. Okay, so you guys ready? Roblox movie, directed by Tim and Eric.
Oh, you got me.
Okay, right?
You got me, I'm in.
Gen Z adopted brain rot.
They did.
Those guys were born in it, okay? But here's the thing, you go straight to streaming because it's the first movie with a live chat. That's either the best idea you've ever heard or the worst idea you've ever heard.
It's a big
in
swing.
between.
Big swing.
Big swing.
Big
for
swing.
all
Who
those.
owns Roblox?
We'll find out.
Okay,
after
you can
the
have that for
panel.
free. Just don't forget me. But there you go.
Tricia?
Yeah, my immediate thought was some of the more obvious ones that people have been trying to adapt for years and haven't found a way into. Portal came to mind. I thought about doing Portal as a Succession type TV show, but with a portal gun. And I thought about Carmen Sandiego, which was a PC game that I loved growing up. I did play some PC games. We just didn't have a game system in my house. Anyway, but that's a tough one to find its way into also, because it feels more like a TV show. It's so episodic, but also it's this big globetrotting adventure. Yeah. But the one I kind of settled on as my pet idea, my partner played this game, Papers, Please, a while ago.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it could be the coolest contained thriller. Like a phone booth or a Buried kind of thing. Just super contained, creeping dread movie. So that's kind of my pitch.
Great. Derick?
Yeah, I mean, like Tricia, there was a lot of stuff I was kicking around. Some more open-ended stuff that you could do where it's once again, this is a world where we could adapt it. Oregon Trail would be fun. What could that story be? Something like Soul Calibur where you focus on one fighter. I just thought of this right now. Tricia talking about some more indie studios, an A24 Alan Wake movie would be really cool. But the one I landed on, because this is an adventure game, and it's an older adventure game, but something that I think has a really strong story from the early era of video game movies. Is anyone out there a fan of the Monkey Island series?
Oh, yeah.
I would love to see a theatrical adaptation of Monkey Island. I think if you do it like Pirates of the Caribbean, that would be great.
That was LucasArts, wasn't it?
It was.
Yeah.
Nice.
I didn't consider any other options outside. I feel very strongly about this. I want BioShock to get the Fallout treatment.
Yeah.
I want limited series. I want enough time for us to go through Jack's story and his exploration of Rapture. I want time to go to flashbacks, what happens with Andrew Ryan and Fontaine, for us as an audience to go on that journey. Put an Elizabeth Comstock cameo in there somewhere so we maybe have a thread for a BioShock Infinite season, That needs to
You're
happen.
cooking.
Yeah, I feel very strongly about it. Can you tell?
Nice. That was really good. I want Jaymo to suck and go with Super Smash Brothers movie.
Gotta wait.
Just give me Super Smash Bros. I love
now?
that game. No, I'm just kidding. I honestly think Halo deserves another shot.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't know if he's a great director for it, but I like Stahelski. Like, he knows how to like build out a stoic character. He doesn't need a lot. I hope they go with an actor that doesn't need to be seen too much, and we really get the Master Chief that I played when I was growing up. Yeah, would be my real answer. Sorry, what was that?
Oh, that could be
Rain
interesting.
World, yeah.
We got
Especially with the
amazing
medium of
ideas.
animation. Yeah.
Dig that.
For the other slug cats, you know how there's like the Gormont, the Gormont, the Artificer, the Spearmaster, the Rivulet, and the Saint. Why not have those as like 5 separate episodes?
Yeah.
Those would be great
This is the
ideas.
guy who's thought
You
about
got
this.
it.
We got amazing
He
ideas.
can't prep for this panel.
But thank you all for these amazing ideas. Hopefully someone with some creative, push on Hollywood can be able to make these come to fruition. But I think we're at a wrap now for our panel. So please, let's give a round of applause for our panelists. I want to thank the panelists, but I also want to thank the amazing WonderCon staff. Without them, this wouldn't be able to possible. So round of applause for them. If you'd like to follow the Underrated Podcast, this QR code, to snap a photo, you'll be able to find Derick's Underrated Podcast. You'll find everything he's doing there. Brief moment to give you guys a chance to take all the photos.
It's a good time.
We're
Get
good?
in there.
Cool. And then we have everyone's socials and everything. You can find everything they're creatively working on, involved in. Please snap a photo of this if you need. We'll be right outside after as well. And that's a wrap for our panel today. Thank you all for joining. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your WonderCon and a safe night as well. Thank
You all are the best.
Thank you
guys for
out.
coming. Thanks for
Thank
staying
you.
late.
Have a good
You
con.
were fun. Hang around if you want to play Virtual Boy.
Mortal Kombat. Just kidding. Sorry.